Mantuvu nodded, following Bien Quanvu's order. Yes, she replied. She knew that now, every bit of combat strength was incredibly important. Tu Honglin took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. At this point, aside from trusting Bien Quanvu, she had no other option. She called Jia Cat Ton Din and said, "Hand over all the information to him." Jia Cat Ton Din also had a displeased expression on his face. He glanced at Bien Quanvu, nodded, and went to retrieve all the shelter information without any objection. Meanwhile, Trindat Tien's thoughts were even more complicated. Clearly, the zombies were creatures they had created. But the situation had now escalated to such a point that it was difficult to handle. Controlling the entire horde of zombies through Huya Dang and the Zombie Kings was a complicated process, and they couldn't convey too much detailed information. Otherwise, the intelligence of the Zombie Kings wouldn't be able to comprehend it. Letting the zombies retreat too easily would also arouse suspicion from other forces. Truong Dike and representatives of other major forces were on their way to the Duong Thin base. However, they were moving cautiously along the way, fearful of encountering the zombies. Everyone had their own complicated thoughts. But the basic principle was the same: no one wanted to die. As Trindat Tien hesitated, he received a message from Mantuvu. After reading it, his face showed fear. He muttered, "Nuclear weapons. What I feared most has finally come." Jiangnan District, with its superior firepower, could indeed easily flatten everything. Trindat Tien couldn't hold back his frustration, slamming his fist against the car. "Damn it," he thought. "How can I ensure that the investigation team doesn't die, make the zombies retreat, and at the same time, avoid arousing their suspicion?" He wondered what the Bai Tuet sect would do once they realized the nuclear threat. Trindat Tien's eyes flashed with a murderous intent, as if he wanted to kill someone. He was caught in a dilemma. Meanwhile, Truong Dike and his group were traveling on a snow vehicle. He had also received the news from Mantuvu. At first, Truong Dike was a bit surprised, but he quickly smiled. "I wonder how the Bai Tuet sect will handle the threat of nuclear weapons," he thought. He wasn't afraid of the impending nuclear strike. In fact, he found it amusing. Although there were some differences from what he had predicted, overall, things hadn't deviated too far. On the contrary, the presence of nuclear weapons was speeding things up. The Bai Tuet sect must be feeling the pressure. They certainly had ways to influence the zombies, and they couldn't let the investigation team die here. As a result, they would have to give up on controlling the horde of hundreds of thousands of zombies, a problem they now had to deal with. Once these zombies were dealt with, it would be nearly impossible for the Bai Tuet sect to create such a large and powerful horde again anytime soon. This would give Truong Dike the opportunity to take them down. Truong Dike looked up at the sky and thought, "The power of nuclear weapons really does evoke a certain fear." In his mind, he could almost see a grim reaper descending from the sky, ready to destroy everything. His combat suit was radiation resistant, capable of withstanding low levels of radiation for short periods. He needed to be prepared for the worst-case scenario. His spatial ability wasn't suitable for long-term survival, but it could provide temporary refuge for a short period. He had already tested it, and it could last for about 1 minute. If he sensed the nuclear strike coming, he could temporarily shelter everyone inside, and wait until the danger passed before launching a counterattack. Although the outcome wasn't guaranteed, it was at least a plan worth trying. The key was that they couldn't be in the central area of the strike zone. Truong Dike took out his satellite phone and warned Chu Ka, Ni and the others hiding in the basement to quickly move to the 3rd underground level. The city of Tianhai could be attacked, he said. He also relayed this information to everyone in the vehicle. After hearing it, everyone's expressions became tense. Even though they were mutants, they were no different from ordinary people when facing an attack of that magnitude, knowing their lives could be at stake. Luong Duyet gripped the steering wheel tightly, not saying a word, deep in thought, trying to figure out how to change the situation. Tubio, pale-faced, muttered, "This is it. There's no way out this time. Boss, why don't we run? We have 24 hours, enough time to escape the city of Tianhai." Truong Dike glanced at the satellite phone in his hand and calmly said, "Oh, and one more thing. They said if we try to run, Jiangnan District will hunt us down relentlessly. Don't you think the zombies are scarier than Jiangnan District?" Tubio's face turned ashen. Clearly, both options put him at risk. Fighting the zombies offered at least a small chance of survival. But if Jiangnan District targeted them, there would be no chance at all. After all, if Jiangnan District wanted, they could use their powerful satellite and internet systems to track them down. Tubio groaned, "This is putting us in an impossible situation." Uncle View chimed in, "We have 24 hours to solve this problem, don't we?" His expression was serious. Killing hundreds of thousands of zombies sounds easy, but even if they were 300,000 pigs, we couldn't kill them all in 24 hours. Knowing there were less than 24 hours before the city of Tianhai would face destruction, everyone felt a sense of urgency. Truong Dike leaned back in his seat, closing his eyes slightly, and said slowly, "Don't worry. There is a way to deal with the zombies this time. As long as we know that the Bai Tuet sect controls them, everything becomes much simpler." They didn't expect me to reveal the location of the zombies. Now, they must be having a headache. But the next problem isn't ours, it's theirs. Truong Dike said, remaining calm. The next move depended on how the Bai Tuet sect would react. After all, they wouldn't want their nearly completed plan to be suddenly destroyed by a nuclear strike. A dark gleam flashed in Truong Dike's eyes. Everything is unfolding as planned, and nothing is outside my expectations. Now, let's see if we can achieve the outcome I've been hoping for. At the Duong Thin base, Bien Quan Vu, Tu Hong Lian, and their group gathered in the command room to begin planning how to break the siege. Although eliminating over 300,000 zombies would be difficult, it wasn't impossible. Every survivor here was among the best of the best. Soon, a temporary plan to destroy the zombies was drawn up. The most important part of the plan was to eliminate their command center, the Zombie King. But this time, we are the ones under attack, Bien Quan Vu said. The Zombie King is surely positioned at the rear of the horde. We need to break out, locate the Zombie King, and eliminate it. Once it loses its command, the zombies won't be as terrifying. In front of Bien Quan Vu was a large electronic information board. At the center was the Duong Thin shelter. Here, we have strong armed forces, including automatic machine guns. Using them to eliminate a group of zombies and thousands of creatures won't be an issue. Tu Hong Lian asked, how do we break through the siege? The zombies are too numerous. Just relying on our weapons won't be enough. Bien Quan Vu adjusted his sunglasses, and the image of Truong Dike appeared in his mind. We'll have to rely on him, he said. No. Dike crossed his arms and sighed. I never thought that at this crucial moment, we'd have to rely on him to save us. Truong Dike's vehicle had not yet reached the Duong Thin base when his satellite phone suddenly rang. The caller was Bien Quan Vu. Truong Dike frowned, and the others looked at him curiously. Knowing everyone was curious about the situation at the Duong Thin base, Truong Dike put the phone on speaker. Captain Bien, is everything okay? Why are you calling me now? Truong Dike asked. The cold voice of Bien Quan Vu came through the phone. We're still alive, but time is running out. Listen, Truong Dike, don't rush over to help us yet. Head to the coast first and use your power to gather seawater. Truong Dike and the others exchanged glances, immediately understanding Bien Quan Vu's plan. You're planning to use the extremely low temperatures to release the seawater onto land and freeze the zombies, aren't you? Facing hundreds of thousands of zombies, they didn't have large-scale weapons that could cause significant damage. However, a large volume of seawater could be an incredibly effective weapon. Most zombies, once immersed in the sea, would have their movements slowed down, making it difficult for them to pose a threat to humans. Additionally, the large amount of seawater brought onto land would freeze quickly, making it an efficient weapon against the zombies. Without wasting any time, Truong Dike responded, I'll gather the water. Wait for me, 4 hours. He immediately asked Luong Duyet, who was driving, to turn the vehicle toward Donghai. Meanwhile, Hin Tien and his group, following Bien Quan Vu's orders, were waiting at a distance from the Duong Thin base. They had to wait until everything was ready before launching a coordinated attack on the zombies. The most critical part of the process was the seawater that Truong Dike was bringing. The 4 hours passed slowly, each minute feeling like torture for those in the shelter. The major factions were also extremely anxious, fearing the looming threat of nuclear weapons. Hin Tien called Bien Quan Vu, nervously asking, how much longer until they arrive? Why is it taking so long? In particular, Trin Dat Tien felt deeply uneasy. He couldn't understand how the investigation team had discovered the zombies they had worked so hard to conceal. Now, he was forced to make a decision. Either abandon the zombies to gain the trust of the Jiangnan district and potentially regrow the zombie horde later with the help of Huyet Dang, or accept total failure and annihilate everyone in Tianhai City, including the investigation team. He thought carefully. No, in such a short time, the zombies won't be able to break through their defenses. Plus, turning against Jiangnan district would be a foolish decision. Clearly, the second option was not reasonable. After a moment of intense contemplation, Tin painfully chose to abandon the 300,000 zombies surrounding the Duong Thin base. Although it pained him, it was the only viable option. Standing at a distance, Trindat Tian's cold gaze rested on the dense zombie horde as he thought. I have to act convincingly so they won't suspect that we're controlling these zombies. A cold wind blew past, and he wrapped his coat tighter around him. Taking a deep breath, the cold air stinging his throat. I can't do anything right now. Bien Quanvu and his group aren't useless, they won't die so easily. I'll just refrain from giving orders to the zombies and let them attack the humans by instinct. At Donghai, after more than 4 hours of work, Truong Dike had gathered a large amount of seawater into his dimensional space. He contacted Bien Quanvu to report the news. We're ready with the seawater, but we need to find a high point to pour it down. Don't expect miracles, this will only slow down the zombies' movements. Nothing more. The area around Duong Thin Base is flat, so we can't completely cover them. Bien Quanvu replied, that's enough. As long as it buys us time to break through the siege, it'll do. Only by breaking the siege can we have a chance to locate and eliminate the Zombie King. The one with intelligence and control over the horde. Once the Zombie King is dead, the threat from the zombies will decrease significantly. Based on our search, we can conclude that this is the last zombie horde in Tianhai City. We won't need to worry about them being secretly controlled again. At least after this battle. Tianhai City won't be troubled by zombies for a while. Bien Quanvu's eyes were cold and determined. After this zombie crisis was over, he vowed to find and capture the person behind all these schemes. Whoever controlled such a massive zombie horde would either become part of Jiangnan district or be eliminated. After the conversation ended, Truong Dike asked Luong Duyet to drive to a high point near the Duong Thin Base. Luong Duyet reacted quickly and turned the vehicle toward the base. From a distance, they could see the enormous zombie horde a few kilometers away. A large, dark mass that instilled fear deep within anyone who saw it. Fortunately, they were far enough away to be safe, and the zombies' attention was focused on the Duong Thin Base. Otherwise, the chase would have caused major trouble for Truong Dike and his team. Tu Bio, seeing the sight, was so scared he almost wet his pants. Thank goodness those zombies are only paying attention to Duong Thin Base. If not, we'd be done for, he muttered. A short while later, Luong Duyet stopped the car at a high point above the Duong Thin Base, making it easier to pour the seawater onto the zombies. Truong Dike's group got out of the vehicle, and Tu Bio continued muttering, so many zombies? Will seawater alone really be enough? He didn't believe it could solve the problem of such a dense zombie horde. Meanwhile, inside the Duong Thin Base, Bien Quanvu had everything planned. He contacted Hin Tien and the others, informing them to prepare for the battle. As soon as Truong Dike began pouring the seawater, those in the shelter would launch a counterattack and attempt to break through the siege. At that moment, they needed to create chaos outside, while supporting the investigation team and a key combat unit leaving from the Duong Thin Base. The other major factions were also ready in nearby positions. With just a command from Bien Quanvu, they would begin harassing the zombies from the outside. Although there weren't many people left from the other factions, everyone was an experienced combatant, with most being elite-level mutants, including top-tier combat personnel. Truong Dike's vehicle arrived at a cliffside location about 4 kilometers from the Duong Thin Base. From this height, they could see the zombie horde below. Truong Dike opened 2 large spatial portals, and immediately, powerful streams of seawater poured out. The water was drawn from deep in the ocean, with a high salt content. However, when exposed to the -60°C air, the seawater froze rapidly. The water flowing from the high point quickly turned into 2 icy rivers, with white ice crystals forming within the powerful streams that flowed toward the flat land around the Duong Thin Base. Truong Dike looked at Tu Bio and said, let's see how it works soon enough. The leaders of the other bases watched in silence as Truong Dike released the seawater from his dimensional space. Inwardly, they were filled with both admiration and fear. Truong Dike turned to his group and asked, are you ready? Uncle Vu, Luong Duyet, and Tu Bio all nodded simultaneously, ready. The water from Truong Dike's 2 spatial doors continued to pour out, the sound of the seawater attracting the attention of the zombies. As soon as they turned around, they were immediately covered by the powerful surge of water. The zombies turned back toward Truong Dike on the cliff and let out roars. At this moment, they were no longer being commanded and were simply acting on instinct to attack the living. Seeing Truong Dike and his group, many zombies charged toward them, but this blind attack couldn't threaten Truong Dike and his team. Truong Dike quickly realized that the zombies' behavior wasn't the same as before when they were being commanded. They didn't even avoid the powerful surge of seawater, which indicated that they posed no real threat. Soon, a large number of zombies were swept away by the seawater, creating chaos among their ranks, like a line of dominoes falling over, causing the zombies behind to become disorganized. Truong Dike couldn't help but smile, thinking to himself, as expected. It's just as I predicted. Ha ha ha, I knew that Nguyen Kongda and Trin Dat Tien wouldn't risk everything. So, let your trump cards end here. The seawater quickly covered a large number of zombies, and tens of thousands of them fell into the water, still struggling to attack Truong. Dich. But they were unable to move as the seawater rose around them. Bien Quan Vu, watching this scene via satellite, immediately gave the order to begin the attack. At the Duong Thin shelter, the ground began to shake as cracks appeared on the surface. Then, several large-diameter cannons slowly emerged. The automatic cannons began to fire flames toward the densest groups of zombies, with explosive rounds instantly wiping out hundreds of them. Hin Tien, Nguyen Den Hai, Tuin Do Ting, and the others also responded to Bien Quan Vu's call, launching attacks on the zombies from 3 different directions. The main form of attack was using superhuman abilities and explosives, as conventional firearms were ineffective against this zombie horde. In this environment, Nguyen Den Hai's abilities were incredibly useful. His power was that of the Ice Lord, a strong combination of offense and defense. He was especially adept at fighting in icy or water-filled environments. With the seawater released by Truong Dike on the snowy plains, it created the ideal battlefield for him. Nguyen Den Hai manipulated the icy river, turning it into his weapon, attacking the zombies and the powerful armored zombies within the horde. By mutant standards, this powerful zombie horde fell into the category of enhanced types, possessing superior strength, defense, and speed. However, even they struggled to resist these attacks. The frozen river and seawater washed away the zombies, quickly freezing them in the water, preventing them from standing on the ground. The 3 factions cooperated in their attacks, catching the zombies off guard. In just a few short minutes, nearly 1/3 of the horde had been wiped out. However, everyone understood that the current situation couldn't be sustained for long. The icy river attacks only disrupted the zombies' formation. They couldn't completely destroy them. The vast difference in numbers meant that if the battle dragged on too long and the seawater ran out, the zombies would be able to regroup and counterattack. Truong Dike told Bien Quan Vu, "We can't stay outside for much longer. You need to break out quickly." Bien Quan Vu understood. I know. He was well aware that this advantage was only temporary. They had thoroughly prepared for the breakout. Inside the shelter, there were still over 1,000 people, most of whom were former oil refinery workers and their families. But this breakout attempt couldn't include them. They had to stay behind. If Bien Quan Vu and his team succeeded, these people would survive. If they failed, those left behind would have to live underground for the rest of their lives. Either way, it was better than stepping outside and being devoured by the zombies. Bien Quan Vu gave the order, "Prepare to break through the siege. Use all firepower." Tu Hong Lian gritted her teeth, stepping forward. "We only have one chance. We must make the most of it. Let's go all in." She approached the control panel and swiftly located a hidden button. Without hesitation, Tu Hong Lian forcefully pressed it. Bien Quan Vu couldn't hide his astonishment at Tu Hong Lian's drastic move. He thought she would unleash all their high-end weapons, but he hadn't expected her to be so decisive. A moment later, at the Duong Thin shelter, a massive explosion erupted from the oil refinery, sending a dazzling light into the sky. The blinding red light stung the eyes, and the deafening explosion made Truong Dike feel like his ears were going deaf. From the ground, a mushroom cloud slowly rose into the sky as the entire earth shook. Even several kilometers away, the tremor felt like a level 9 earthquake, making it impossible for Truong Dike and his group to stay on their feet. Truong Dike's eyes widened in disbelief at what he was witnessing. Oh my god. Tu Hong Lian. She blew up the oil refinery. It was well known that the oil refinery contained millions of barrels of crude oil, which formed the foundation of Tu Hong Lian's power in the city of Tianhai. But now, she had triggered its explosion. The intense heat wave swept across the surrounding area, incinerating at least 70 to 80,000 zombies in the process. Fortunately, Truong Dike and his group were all wearing heat-resistant combat suits. Otherwise, he felt certain that they would have suffered severe burns. Don't miss out on the next exciting chapter. Make sure to follow and share this video, so you and your friends can enjoy the story together. Truong Dike couldn't help but exclaim, "She's truly ruthless." Tu Hong Lian, a woman ruthless to others but even more ruthless to herself. Although her actions were the wisest decision in the current situation, not everyone could be so decisive. The explosion didn't stop with just the first blast. After the initial detonation, a series of other explosions followed. A massive fire swept across the area, turning the frozen river into a boiling lake. This caused the surrounding area to melt, creating a seething river where zombies floated, moaning in agony. The virus in their bodies couldn't withstand the high temperature and was quickly destroyed. Truong Dike and his team hurriedly retreated, not daring to approach due to the intense impact of the explosion. It wasn't until about 10 minutes later that the power of the explosion began to subside, but the flames continued to burn brightly. The surrounding area had turned into a vast scorched land, resembling a boiling lake. This explosion had caused the zombie horde to suffer massive losses, with more than half of them wiped out. Bien Quan Vu and the investigation team members were stunned. None of them had anticipated that Tu Honglin would make such a bold move. Their respect for the leader of the Duong Thin base had grown significantly. Not only respect but also fear. If someone could be so ruthless with themselves, what would they do to others? Tu Honglin's eyes gleamed with madness as she muttered, interesting. In an instant, she had decided to destroy the entire stock of crude oil in the refinery. However, what others didn't know was that the Duong Thin base didn't have just one oil storage. No one would put all their eggs in one basket. She still had 500,000 barrels of crude oil hidden elsewhere. If she didn't, how could she have so easily destroyed the foundation of the Duong Thin base? This move was like a warrior cutting off their own hand, an unavoidable sacrifice to find a way out. Bien Quan Vu looked at her, raised his hand in salute with admiration, and said, "A warrior cutting off her own hand. Captain Tu, you're truly decisive." Tu Honglin led the way toward the main gate of the shelter. "Let's go. We need to leave quickly and take advantage of the chaos in the zombie horde." Mantu Vu asked from behind her, "But the outside has turned into a vast sea. How are we supposed to leave? If we try to swim, we'll become targets for those winged armored zombies." Tu Honglin gritted her teeth, "No matter how dangerous it is, we have to try. Now is our best chance. Turning this place into a sea was unexpected. But even though we anticipated it, we have to act." Deep Kang, the explosives expert and mechanical engineer on the investigation team, stepped forward. "We can quickly assemble a small boat." Jia Kat Ton Din hurriedly asked, "Can we make it in time? We don't have much time left." Deep Kang replied swiftly and clearly, "I need a vehicle." Jia Kat Ton Din responded, "We have one." Deep Kang nodded, "Good. Get some people who know about machinery to help me." Bien Quan Vu checked his watch, then looked outside. He said to Deep Kang, "You have 15 minutes to finish the job." Although the explosion had wiped out half of the zombies, the sheer size of the horde on the snowy plains meant that the zombies on the outer edges had been less affected. Moreover, zombies from underwater were slowly crawling back onto land. Before long, they would surround the Duong Thin base. And by then, leaving would no longer be easy. Deep Kang quickly rolled up his sleeves and headed to the back, saying, "I'll have it ready in 10 minutes. With that, he got to work, assembling a makeshift boat from a bicycle and other mechanical tools. At that moment, Bien Quan Vu's phone rang, and Truong Dike's voice came through. "Bien Quan Vu, are you ready to get out?" From a distance, Truong Dike could see that the zombies still hadn't given up on attacking the people in the shelter. Over 100 giant flying armored zombies were circling above the lake, screeching loudly. The massive fire from the oil refinery continued to blaze, with occasional explosions still occurring. Though the blasts weren't as intense as the initial one, the fire would likely burn for at least another 10 days to 2 weeks, before finally extinguishing. Bien Quan Vu replied to Truong Dike, "We're about to leave. Truong Dike, your combat skills aren't bad. Help me take care of those flying pests in the sky." Truong Dike sighed lightly, "Doing so will reveal my position. But because of our relationship, I'll do it." Bien Quan Vu was a crucial part of Truong Dike's plan. So of course, Truong Dike had to help him. Additionally, dealing with the zombies' attention was something they could handle. The flames and explosions from the refinery had already attracted most of the zombies' attention. Even if some zombies attacked, Truong Dike was confident they could take care of them.